The 1930s was an extraordinary decade, not only because of the Great Depression, which crippled economies worldwide, but also because it witnessed the rise of new political experiments and dangerous authoritarian leaders. In this lecture, we begin exploring the dictators whose regimes reshaped global politics and ultimately helped lead the world into World War II. In this section, we will examine three of the most influential dictators of the 20th century: Benito Mussolini of Italy, Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union, and Adolf Hitler of Germany. We begin with Mussolini because, in many ways, he pioneered the modern style of dictatorship that would later be adopted and adapted by leaders such as Hitler. His methods of consolidating power, controlling political opposition, and promoting an authoritarian state helped establish a model that influenced other totalitarian regimes in Europe. Mussolini was the founder of fascism, a term that is often used today but can be difficult to define precisely. Mussolini did not create a clear ideological blueprint. There is no fascist manifesto comparable to Marx's writings. Still, we can identify several defining characteristics. Above all, Benito Mussolini was a nationalist who sought to restore what he viewed as the lost glory of ancient Rome. He envisioned an Italy that was strong, disciplined, respected, and feared by other nations. To achieve this goal, he promoted military pride, national unity, imperial expansion, and the widespread use of Roman symbols and imagery. Through speeches, propaganda, and public ceremonies, Mussolini encouraged Italians to see themselves as the heirs of Julius Caesar and the powerful Roman legions, fostering a sense of pride in Italy's past and support for his authoritarian vision of the nation's future. Mussolini was determined to present himself as the embodiment of Italian strength and power. He carefully cultivated a public image that emphasized toughness, confidence, and authority. He frequently wore military uniforms, even when not serving in a military capacity, and became known for his dramatic strutting, rigid poses, and highly theatrical appearances. His speeches were emotional and energetic, designed to inspire crowds and demonstrate his commanding presence. Mussolini also projected an exaggerated masculine, or macho, image that portrayed him as a decisive and fearless leader. Although modern viewers often find his exaggerated gestures and swagger somewhat comical, these carefully crafted performances were highly effective at winning supporters and reinforcing his image as the strong leader Italy needed. His followers, known as the Blackshirts, marched in uniform, staged parades, and used violence to intimidate opponents. Mussolini wanted Italians to value discipline, loyalty, and obedience above all else. Mussolini openly despised democracy and believed that it weakened a nation rather than strengthened it. In his view, parliamentary debate was inefficient and ineffective. Political parties created unnecessary divisions among citizens, and strong leadership was preferable to compromise and negotiation. He also believed that violence and force were legitimate tools for achieving political goals and maintaining authority. Unlike leaders who rose to power through strictly constitutional means, Mussolini relied on intimidation, political pressure, and the threat of violence to expand his influence. Once in power, he showed little respect for democratic institutions or legal limitations, steadily dismantling the safeguards that protected political freedom and replacing them with an authoritarian system centered on his own leadership. Interestingly, Mussolini did not begin his political career as a nationalist or fascist. Before World War I, he was an active member of the Italian Socialist Party, worked as a newspaper editor, and was a vocal critic of capitalism, the monarchy, and traditional political institutions. However, the outbreak of World War I marked a major turning point in his beliefs. While most socialists opposed the war, Mussolini argued that Italy should enter the conflict, believing that participation would strengthen national unity and potentially bring territorial gains. His support for the war led to a break with the Socialist Party. Mussolini later served in the Italian army and was wounded in the leg during his military service. After the war, he became convinced that Italy had been cheated out of its rightful rewards despite being on the winning side. Frustrated by what he saw as a national humiliation, he embraced a more nationalist and authoritarian outlook, determined to restore Italy's prestige and toughen the Italian people through discipline, unity, and strength. Mussolini organized a new political movement known as the Fasci di Combattimento, bundles of combat, a name that gave rise to the term fascism. The movement attracted a diverse group of supporters, including war veterans who felt betrayed by the post-war settlement, unemployed workers struggling with economic hardship, angry young men frustrated with Italy's political instability, and others drawn to messages of nationalism, strength, and action. Many of these followers became known as the Blackshirts, a paramilitary organization that served as Mussolini's unofficial enforcers. The Blackshirts regularly used intimidation and violence against political opponents, breaking up rival meetings, attacking labor unions, beating critics, and, in some cases, murdering those who resisted them. Through these tactics, they helped create an atmosphere of fear and disorder that weakened opposition and contributed to Mussolini's rise to power. In October 1922, Mussolini organized the March on Rome, a dramatic show of force in which thousands of Blackshirt supporters mobilized and moved toward the Italian capital. Although the march itself was not a military takeover, it created the impression that Mussolini and his followers were prepared to seize power by force if necessary. Faced with growing political instability and fearing that resistance might lead to civil war, King Victor Emmanuel III chose not to use the army to stop the marchers. Instead, he invited Mussolini to form a government, effectively appointing him prime minister. Once in office, Mussolini moved quickly to strengthen his position. Over the next several years, he weakened and eventually dismantled Italy's democratic institutions, suppressed political opposition, censored the press, and consolidated power in his own hands, transforming Italy into a fascist dictatorship. Although Mussolini carefully cultivated an image of strength and decisive leadership, the Italian fascist state never achieved the same level of totalitarian control as Adolf Hitler's Germany or Joseph Stalin's Soviet Union. Fascist propaganda often exaggerated Mussolini's accomplishments and portrayed him as the leader who had restored order and efficiency to Italy. One popular saying claimed that Mussolini made the trains run on time, although historians have shown that this achievement was only partially true and was amplified by government propaganda. Nevertheless, Mussolini's regime did undertake several public works projects, implemented policies that helped lessen some of the effects of the Great Depression, and pursued aggressive imperial ambitions. The most notable example of this expansionist policy was the Italian invasion of Ethiopia in 1935, which was intended to build a new Italian empire and demonstrate national strength. Despite these efforts, Mussolini never developed a clear and consistent ideology comparable to the racial doctrines of Nazism or the economic theories of communism. Instead, Italian fascism was a blend of nationalism, propaganda, political opportunism, and the use of violence and intimidation to maintain power. Although Mussolini was an influential figure who helped pioneer modern authoritarian politics, he was eventually overshadowed by two even more powerful and destructive dictators, Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union and Adolf Hitler of Germany. Stalin built a vast system of state control and terror that affected millions of people through political purges, forced labor camps, and widespread repression. Hitler, meanwhile, established a Nazi regime built on extreme nationalism, racism, and militarism, ultimately unleashing World War II and carrying out the Holocaust, one of history's greatest acts of genocide. While Mussolini's dictatorship served as a model for later authoritarian leaders, Stalin and Hitler expanded the power of the modern state to unprecedented levels and pushed authoritarian rule to far darker and more devastating extremes.